Australian Eastern Standard Time, welcome to 6 News' special live coverage of the 2023 federal budget. In half an hour, Treasurer Jim Chalmers will speak in Canberra in what is his second ever budget speech. Understood to be big on the agenda tonight is dealing with inflation and cost of living pressures, as well as the ongoing job seeker payment discussion. For more, let's bring in our chief anchor, Leo Puglisi. Leo, this is huge, isn't it?
Yeah, g'day Austin. So these reports came in over the weekend that the federal government will apparently increase JobSeeker by up to $40 a fortnight in the budget, which is of course due to be handed down shortly. Sky News reports the payment will increase across the board by around $2.85 a day. It does follow those initial reports we saw on outlets like Channel 7 that there would be an increase for over 55s on the payment. Now, Green Senator Janet Rice, she says that if these reports are true, Labor's planned increase to JobSeeker is, and I quote, less than even the Liberals did under Scott Morrison, and is a slap in the face to everyone in desperate need of a substantive increase to the rate of Centrelink payments. She added that, quote, this is still $500 a fortnight below the Henderson poverty line and more than $200 below the recommendations of the government's own hand-picked Economic Inclusion Advisory Committee. Now, Deputy Liberal leader Susan Ley, she's told Sky News that increasing job seekers slightly is the best thing Labor can do for those on the payment. Now, we know a number of Labor MPs, all of which are backbenchers, not too surprising, have called for an increase in recent days, some of them signing an open letter. That includes Michelle Anada-Raj, Josh Burns, Mary Doyle, Cassandra Fernando, Mike Freelander, Karina Garland, Steve Georgianis, Julian Hill, Peter Khalil, Jerome Laxale, Louise Miller-Frost, Daniel Molino, Peter Murphy, Alicia Payne, Dan Rapaccioli, Kate Thwaites, and Josh Wilson. Some of the other MPs who have signed that open letter to the PM also include Liberal Bridget Archer, David Pocock, Senator David Pocock, Jackie Lambie, Network Senator Jackie Lambie, and Independents Kate Cheney, Zoe Daniel, Helen Haynes, Monique Ryan, Kylie Tink, Sophie Scamps, Zali Stegel, Allegra Spender, and Andrew Wilkie. The Greens, of course, as we just heard before, are also wanting an increase, as is Centre Alliance MP Rebecca Sharkey. Here's what she had to say about it when asked on 6 News.
Look, I've been campaigning for an increase on JobSeeker and been talking about that for many, many years. The government today is sort of saying that they're going to do something for the over 55s. I think that's really important. We know that people that are over 55, particularly if they don't, particularly older women, if they don't have a very strong work history and qualifications, have a very difficult time getting employment. There's a couple of things around JobSeeker that I think we need to do more broadly and just around Centrelink payments. First of all, I think we need to lift the threshold that anyone can earn before they start losing 50% of the dollar in their payments. I think we need to, in this budget very much look at Commonwealth rent assistance. The one that's glaringly obvious to me, aside from lifting JobSeeker, and I remember years ago we were campaigning on an extra $75 a week, is youth allowance. Youth allowance is so pitifully low that I don't know how any young person could possibly afford to live out of home in any capacity on youth allowance independent. It's just so low that it's impossible. It's impossible. I think, really the rate in real terms hasn't gone up since I was 21, and I think I was getting Oz study back then when I was at uni and supplementing that with a bit of work. So I think that there's a number of measures. I'm keen to see what the government does as well with respect to single parents, and when their youngest child turns, whatever age that is now, it's currently 8, and them transitioning off the single parents payment and onto JobSeeker. Back in a committee that I was on with Russell Broadbent, he was the chair. This is going back to 2000 and maybe 18, 19. I could be wrong there. But I'm pretty sure that's about the time frame. We had an inquiry with respect to intergenerational poverty, and even then one of the recommendations was having a look at raising that age where a parent transitions from one payment to the other, because we know that we have an obscene number of children that are in poverty in this nation. That's a key component of it. So yes, I'd like to see not just over 55s, but more broadly, job seeker and particularly youth allowance. And I find it hard to understand how we can say we can't change that because it's inflationary, but then at the same time, we've still got the stage 3 tax cuts in there. To me, surely they would be more of a threat to inflation than lifting job seeker.
And Leo, what else can we expect from tonight's budget?
Yeah, Austin, also in the budget, 5 million households and 1 million businesses will receive up to $500 relief on their power bills, which is part of a $1.5 billion package. Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek also saying Labor will invest more than $40 million to address what she's called a critical backlog of repair work to Sydney Harbour. 45.2 million will be allocated in the budget for the harbour. That includes 26.5 million to replace rotting wharves and docks, 7.6 million to repair immediate safety concerns, which includes things like rock falls from cliff, 5 million for critical maintenance work to keep sites open and safe, 3.5 million for heritage advice and project management, and 2.6 million to repair critical infrastructure, including unstable seawalls and deteriorating wharves. So it's going to be a big budget. Of course, it's the second that Jim Chalmers has handed down. We know we had with that budget in October last year after Labor came to power. But of course, it's coming at a time, as we heard before, the big issues being job seeker, you've got inflation, and of course people are still talking about stage 3 tax cuts. They don't come into effect this year, but we have had continued calls for them to be axed. Again though, the job seeker payment is going to be something that a lot of people are going to be focusing on tonight, so we'll have all that coverage for you when it happens live.
Leo Puglisi, great to chat with you, thank you. And for more analysis, 6 News spoke to Steve Beattie from the Australian Democrats.
It's going to be a tricky budget for the government, Leo. I think there's no doubt about that. The economic conditions broadly are tricky. So in fairness to them, they've got a few things that they need to balance and a few things that they need to navigate as they go through this process of delivering what is an important marker in the economic year, and certainly an important marker for a government to deliver. We've got inflation running at 7%, and it is coming down, but it's historically very high, and it's obviously well outside the target band that the Reserve Bank looks for of that 2 to 3%. Wages growth are running at 3.3% at the moment, year on year, which means real wages are going backwards, and going backwards fast. The estimates for growth in the economy are only 1.5%, and that's due to persist for the next 2 years. So that's sluggish at best. And the last thing the government wants to do is tip the economy into a recession. That would not look good for them. On the flip side, we've got $895 billion in national debt. It's forecast to go up over $1 trillion over the next 4 years. And that's something else that they very much have to consider. All of that hits our lowest income households the most. So they're being hit hardest at the moment with that combination of factors. And absolutely, the change in the rate for job seeker recipients for all forms of support payments really need to be increased. And it's something that everyone is going to be looking for in this budget.
So in general, and you did touch on it there, but you know, given there's both the international challenges, especially around issues like inflation, there's things that you could argue were just kind of left over from the coalition government. They haven't just emerged in the past 12 months. Do you think there's any way that the Treasurer of the government will be able to please people, or is this going to be one of those tough budgets with one of those the line about this is what needs to be done, there's no avoiding this, etc., etc.?
I think that they definitely have ways that they can deliver relief for households, especially those low-income households, and do it in a way that's not going to drive inflation, and do it in a way that's not going to drive up the debt further. We know at the moment that due to inflation, government revenue is actually up. So there's an expectation that we'll actually be much closer to a surplus in this budget than was even expected in the October budget, where it was forecast at about $36 billion. So as a result of inflation, as a result of higher commodity prices, we actually think that the budget may come in much closer to either a break-even point or maybe even a surplus. The government has lots of options, though, in terms of how it can deliver that kind of cost of living relief to those low-income households without driving up inflation. It can do things like add items to the pharmaceutical benefit scheme. It can increase the Medicare rebate for GP visits. It can increase access to mental health services. It can, and it has already announced that it will introduce childcare and early childhood education benefits into households, I think up to 95% of the cost. These are all things that actually have a deflationary impact on the economy. They actually bring prices down rather than drive them up. All of those things can be targeted at those low-income households. It doesn't require them to increase any of those job seeker rates or any of those benefit rates, but at the same time, they can in fact target those households to provide that relief. That being said, there's a very, very clear message that came out of the government's Economic Inclusion Advisory Forum just a couple of weeks ago, where they made it very, very clear that those rates of support benefits are far too low and they really need to be increased. They're actually acting as a barrier for people to participate in society and do things like find a job.
The other thing that isn't actually coming into effect this year, but it's still talked about, was talked about last year, stage 3 tax cuts, and the government, they've talked about it. I think they've been kind of adamant that they're not going to move, although they have at the same time, I will say there have been reports that they will move on it eventually. I don't think we're expecting it this budget, but this again, kind of like the issue of raising job seeker. It seems to be an issue that will not go away for them until a kind of definitive stance is taken, or something like that.
Nor should it, Leo. It's bad policy. It was bad policy when the coalition government introduced it. It was bad policy when Labor supported it when in opposition. It remains bad policy given the state of the economy. It is deeply problematic in terms of driving inequality. It degrades the progressive nature of our taxation system at a really structural level. It's expensive at $20 billion a year, thereabouts, to begin with. That's money that we could be spending elsewhere, and it's being heavily targeted at high income earners. Most of the benefits go to people earning over $120,000 a year. And the higher up those income brackets you go, the greater the percentage of savings that they get. All the way up to people earning $200,000 a year will receive a $9,000 a year tax break. Of that money, 2/3 of it goes to men. Only one third of it will go to women, because that's the nature of those higher income tax brackets. So the idea that it should go through at all is kind of nonsense. The government has avoided dealing with the issue. They've said it's something that was agreed by the previous government. They're not going to deal with it now. It doesn't come into effect until July 1st, 2024, so it doesn't need to be touched. I don't agree with that. I think the public needs the certainty that says that money is not going to be given to those wealthy and high income earners, that we are going to use it elsewhere. And they certainly need to stop using it as an excuse for us not to be able to afford things like raising the job seeker rate. Let's say I am the Treasurer, Leo, and I do get to implement some of our policy. I think two of the key areas that we would be looking to address is climate change. And really shifting the way in which we fund our climate action, and stop funding fossil fuels. So we still have in the budget, and there was research out just today or just recently by the Australia Institute indicating that we still subsidise the fossil fuel industry in Australia to the tune of about $14 billion a year. Now, at a time when we're trying to transition away from fossil fuels, the idea that you would subsidise an industry that you're trying to transition away with doesn't make a great deal of sense. We have $2 billion that we're expecting to see allocated to infrastructure in the Northern Territory to allow for gas extraction out of the Beetaloo Basin, now that that's been approved. Again, like, that's money that you just wouldn't spend on an industry that you are trying to transition away from. Instead, we would be putting that kind of investment into electric vehicles, into renewable energy, and into the type of infrastructure needed to distribute renewable energy more reliably around the country. That'd be one area. And by investing seriously, I mean tens of billions of dollars. So you think about the sort of money we're spending on subsidies at the moment, start to spend that volume of money rather than the hundreds of millions that we see on electric vehicle policy instead. So you start to spend that money there. The second big thing is a whole raft of issues broadly related to inequality in Australia, both wealth and income inequality. We see it in the gender pay gap. We see it in retirement outcomes for women. So we would be looking to actually make changes in the opposite direction for the taxation system, both at a corporate tax level and at the level of individual taxes, to rebalance that income take so that we move the burden away from low-income earners. We'd actually increase the tax-free threshold. We'd increase the rates of corporate and personal tax. And we absolutely advocate for the increase in the job seeker and other benefits up above the Henderson poverty line, and then have them indexed at that level so that they don't become this constant political tug of war about the deserved versus the undeserving poor.
Steve Beattie, National Vice President of the Australian Democrats there. Well, Treasurer Jim Chalmers will be speaking very shortly, and we'll have more coverage, including reading out your comments and questions live. You're watching 6 News. Stay with us.
Almost a year on from the federal election, what will Jim Chalmers be delivering in his second ever budget speech? Impartial reporting on what the Albanese government's decisions will mean for you.
Budget 2023 special coverage live on the 6 News YouTube channel and our website 6newsau.com.
Hello, thanks for being with us this Tuesday evening right here on 6 News for the 2023 federal budget. Of course, it's going to be a huge night. A lot of things we're expecting. You know, we've had the leaks coming for ages. We've had a lot of preparation, of course, and we know that the big word and the big topic out of this seems to be job seeker. What is going to happen in regards to a potential job seeker increase, and then also, would that even be enough? You know, we just heard from Steve Beattie there, the National Vice President of the Australian Democrats. You know, he's been talking about it, and so many of you are as well. So, of course, do leave your comments in the live chat right now. We will be reading your comments out live all throughout the night. We have our national reporter, Austin Pollock, and our political editor, Roman McKinnon, with us for tonight's coverage. We just saw Austin there. Good evening to you both. Austin, I'll start with you. What are some of the things that we can expect from this budget? What is really the things that we're going to be looking for and following tonight?
Yeah, Leo, good evening to you. It is a big night for Treasurer Jim Chalmers handing down his second ever budget. It's promising relief to the household budget tonight. Obviously, that's a major issue facing Aussies right now. And the budget, for the first time since the 2008, when the global financial crisis tipped it into the red, the budget will be in surplus this year. And now many are calling it small. It's $4 billion, which makes up for just about 0.6% of the budget's revenue. But a surplus doesn't mean for the household that the rising cost of living pressures will immediately ease up. Now, the surplus isn't likely to last very long due to, and for those who don't know, a budget deficit occurs when a government spends more money than it takes in, and a budget surplus occurs the opposite, when the government receives more money in tax revenue than it spends. But the Treasurer is being careful in what he is saying today, saying at the press conference there are good reasons to be cautious about it, but also optimistic. with the understanding of whether it will be back in surplus to not be understood for a good few months, as the last government promised this, and it, never happened due to the pandemic back in the 2019 budget. Now, this is all despite a projected $78 billion deficit in the coalition's budget back in March 2022 last year. And a big part, as I mentioned, is the cost of living, with rising interest rates and more pressures on the household budget. So we have some details on a $15 billion cost of living package. And at this stage, what we know, it will include extending single parenting payment, energy bill relief for 5 million households, potential changes to JobSeeker, and Nine this evening is reporting that the interest rate for JobSeeker will increase, rising it from $50 per day. But tonight we will know if it is targeted to certain age groups and what that will look like, and also expecting increases to the youth allowance and also the Oz Study Initiative. The government says the budget will improve by more than $143 billion from the Morrison government's 2022-23 budget from now until the 2025-26 financial period. Now, and something that the Treasurer has to make sure and is quite the balancing act to support Aussies without further increasing inflation. I'm sure I'm not the only person in Australia hoping not. I'm sure there's not one person in Australia hoping for another interest rate rise. So we'll see how that is handled tonight. So Leo, I'm sure many people will be sitting back with their Back in Black budget mugs from 2019, or maybe not, but it's certainly a massive night ahead for the Treasurer and indeed the Albanese government, how they will handle this.
Yeah, absolutely, Austin, and I think we all remember those the Back in Black mugs and how that aged well or maybe not. Let's get to our political editor, Roman McKinnon. Austin, we will come back to you. Of course, we are waiting for the Treasurer. He'll be at 7:30. That'll be brought to you live right here on 6 News, so don't go anywhere. But Roman, as touched on by Austin there, these inflation pressures, they just haven't seemed to have gone away, and it's been going on for months now, and so that might be the biggest thing that the government has to deal with tonight, because I'm sure you've seen it as well. The price of simple things at the supermarket, they just seem to keep going up.
Absolutely, and that's definitely something on the front of a lot of Australians' minds. Great to be with you tonight, Leo. Definitely cost of living, arguably the most important thing of this budget. The budget, as we know or expected, it'll include power bill rebates. We'll also see cheaper medicines and cheaper childcare. We'll also see a 15% pay increase for aged care workers. Also, wages helping to the surplus, in which Austin mentioned. It means a lower unemployment rate, meaning that more Australians are in jobs. So a very promising sign, and also promising for Jim Chalmers, and also extremely promising for the Labor government to show their economic strength and what they can do in government. Obviously, Jim Chalmers already has handed down his first budget back in October, but definitely a little bit different circumstances there. This will be his first May budget, so very interesting to see how it all plays out tonight.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've been on, I guess you could say, the regular budget schedule. We had I think it was April one from Josh Frydenberg last year, the early one. And then, of course, as you mentioned, we had Jim Chalmers in October. But now we're back on schedule in terms of having it in May, first Tuesday in May. And look, it seems, as you touched on there, it's going to be a big test for the Albanese government. They've had, we're approaching a year now of government. This isn't, you can't say it's a new government anymore. We're far past that stage. It'll be in a couple of weeks exactly a year since they won. And so I'll get to you, Austin, again in a second. But Roman, in terms of electorally, when you've got constant polling that continues to come out, you'd really want to continue to perform strong here, and hopefully keep going up, because as we know, the Albanese government electorally has done pretty decently, both with just general polling and also, as we both know, the Aston by-election.
Yeah, absolutely, and this will be the first surplus in over 15 years. Another
We still got you, Austin? Roman?
Yeah, sorry. So the first surplus in over 15 years, and then the first surplus since 1989 when Paul Keating was treasurer. So definitely a long time for obviously 15 years since the last surplus, and a long time coming for the Labor government to show what they can do in government, and so far so good for them.
Yeah, absolutely, and look, we'll see. And without going too off topic, we know there are 2 by-elections coming up. Well, if you think Morrison's going to go, which he may, but there's at least one coming up. So Roman, thank you, Austin. Jim Chalmers, he's certainly in terms of personally for him. We know he's able to give a budget speech. He's I'm sure he's been practicing this maybe in the mirror for quite some time now. But it's really going to be interesting to see not just the announcements themselves, but also, as we usually get, the preamble, the long talk we get way before we actually hear something announced, and that'll be interesting because I know there'll be people who are genuinely you could almost say on the edge of their seats because they want relief. You could say they need relief here, and they're hoping for something, and they'll be paying close attention. So you wonder whether they're just gonna get on with the speech, or we're just gonna have a long kind of political yada 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 for the first 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, well, I'll say it's probably one of the biggest budgets we've seen since at the very least 2008 and the financial crisis. It's a massive issue, the household budget right now, increasing interest rates, increasing cost of living pressures, as you and Roman were speaking about just a few moments ago. And it's a big balancing act for the Treasurer tonight to ensure all these measures to support the households aren't then counterbalanced by inflation. So it's certainly a massive budget. Many people will be tuning in, as you say, on the edge of their seats tonight to find out what support they'll be getting. Of course, that $15 billion cost of living package certainly hoping to help, and those increasing in job seeker have definitely been a topical issue as of late. A lot of developing news on that. So it probably, given the circumstances, you would have to think there'll be a lot of fluff cut out of the budget tonight.
We never know, and of course, again, as I said, maybe they'll mention something given the election anniversary is approaching. Keep your comments coming in, by the way. We'll continue to read them out live. Nobody says that if Jim Chalmers do not raise job seeker while keeping the Stage 3 tax cuts, it will be extremely disappointing. Yes, that is the other thing. Stage 3 tax cuts, they don't come into effect till next year. The government's pretty much seemed to say they won't scrap them, though they've had some kind of, I think they've talked about consideration. I'm not sure. At least there's been some kind of potential there. I don't think that's really been on anyone's agenda, and I think if it was going to be scrapped, we would have had it leaked by now. So it would be a big surprise, at least to me, if it is not if it is scrapped, I should say. Aaron Davidson says, quote, so far Labor is all talk. Hopefully they listen to the Greens and David Pocock and start putting the money where they promised. So again, keep your comments coming in. Infi Aaron says, in regards to the potential job seeker increase, which will be $2.85 a day, barely enough to buy a carton of milk. Which if you, as we talked about with inflation, if you see the milk prices, that is true. That is absolutely true. But look, we will keep that coming for you. Look, we're gonna bring it up now. We have the Parliament feed. It's on. We actually have the Parliament feed now, so we can bring that to you in a moment, or I should say now, hopefully. But yeah, so stay with us. We're gonna bring that to you in a second. But any final thoughts, just very quickly, Austin, I'll get to you, Roman.
Yeah, look, Leo, definitely. It's a massive night for households. One of the highly anticipated budgets. Obviously, as I said, time and time again, there's a lot of pressures on households right now, and hopefully the government can provide some assistance.
Pretty much the same from Austin, but I'm definitely interested to see how Jim Chalmers will present himself. Obviously, he might have a little bit of a spring in his step, knowing that it will be a budget surplus as well. So quite interesting to watch that there.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're going to listen in live now, and don't forget to stay with us because we will have more coverage straight after for you. But stay with us here on 6 News. You're watching live Budget Night 2023.
Telegraph moves slow.
Honourable members, the Speaker.
I have received a message from His Excellency the Administrator recommending, in accordance with Section 56 of the Constitution, an appropriation for the purposes of the Appropriation Bill No. 1, 2023-2024. I call the Treasurer.
I present the Appropriation Bill No. 1, 2023-24 and the explanatory memorandum.
I call the Clerk.
First reading, a bill for an act to appropriate money out of the Consolidated Revenue Fund for the ordinary annual services of the government and for related purposes.
I give the call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I move that the bill be now read a second time. Speaker, we acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, the Yuggera and the Yugambeh country around Logan, and all the First Nations of Australia, their elders, customs and traditions. And we recognise the opportunity that we have this year to move forward together, listening to each other in a spirit of unity and respect. Yes. Mr Speaker, the budget we present to the Australian people tonight provides cost of living relief that is responsible and affordable and prioritises those most in need. It delivers historic investments in Medicare and the care economy, making it easier and cheaper for Australians to see their doctor. It broadens opportunity by breaking down the barriers of disadvantage and exclusion. It lays the foundations for growth by embracing clean energy and investing in value-adding industries, people, skills, technology and small business. And it strengthens the budget with a surplus forecast for this year with less debt than smaller deficits compared with recent budgets. Yeah. These are the foundations on which our government is building a stronger economy and a fairer society, with greater security in a time of economic uncertainty, more opportunities in more parts of our country, and a renewed determination for Australia to make the most of the defining decade ahead. Speaker, in all of our decisions, we seek to strike a considered, methodical balance between spending restraint to keep the pressure off inflation while doing what we can to help people struggling to make ends meet, making sure that vital services like Medicare and the National Disability Insurance Scheme are secure and reliable and sustainable, and dealing with immediate near-term challenges while investing in our long-term national economic success, seeing our people through the hard times and setting our country up for a better future. Mr. Speaker, the global economy is slowing due to persistent inflation, higher interest rates and financial sector strains. Outside of the pandemic and the global financial crisis, the next 2 years are expected to be the weakest for global growth in over 2 decades, and this will affect us here in Australia. Our economic growth is expected to slow from 3.25% this year to 1.5% next year before recovering to 2.25% the one after. Despite this, our economy will continue to create jobs and unemployment is expected to remain low by historical standards, 4.25% in 23-24, 4.5% the year after. And in this environment, inflation remains our primary economic challenge. It drives rate rises and it erodes real wages, which is why this budget is carefully calibrated to alleviate inflationary pressures, not add to them. Our policies to ease the pressure on households will take 0.75 percentage point off inflation in 23-24, which is expected to fall from 6% this year to 3.25% next year, returning to the Reserve Bank's target band in 2024-25. Still higher than we'd like, for longer than we'd like, but tracking in the right direction. So while Australia may have a lot coming at us, we have a lot going for us as well. High prices for the things we sell overseas, a strong, well-regulated, secure banking system, low unemployment, and welcome signs that after a decade of being kept deliberately low, wages are moving again. Yeah. Wages growth for 2023-24 is now forecast to be 4%, up 0.25 percentage point from what was expected in October. This combination of lower than expected inflation and higher wages means that an earlier and stronger return to real wages growth is forecast for 2023-24. Speaker, at the same time, we understand that Australians are under the pump right now, and that's why providing responsible, targeted relief is the #1 priority in this budget. Our $14.6 billion cost of living plan will provide help with power bills, bring down out-of-pocket health costs, support vulnerable Australians, create more affordable housing and boost wages. Speaker, back in November, gas bills were set to go up by 20% in 23-24 and electricity bills were set to rise by 36%. Now, this was the high price Australians were slated to pay for the Russian invasion of Ukraine and a decade of energy policy failure here at home. Our government refused to stand by and let this happen. We took urgent and targeted action to place a cap on coal and gas prices, and tonight we are delivering up to $3 billion in direct energy bill relief for eligible households and small businesses, co-funded with the states and territories. More than 5 million households will have up to $500 deducted from their power bills in the next financial year. Real relief, right off your power bill, right when you need it. And because of our policies, electricity price increases are expected to be around 25 percentage points less than what was projected, and 16 percentage points less for gas. And a big part of making sure that energy bills are more affordable into the future is improving the energy efficiency of Australian homes, and not just new builds. Through this budget, we are investing $1 billion to help provide low-cost loans for double glazing and solar panels and other improvements that will make homes easier and cheaper to keep cool in summer and warm in winter. A common-sense program that will help family budgets and reduce emissions. Speaker, our first budget capped the price of medicines on the pharmaceutical benefit scheme for around 3.6 million Australians, so that most now pay no more than $30 for the medicines that they need. In our second budget, we're investing $2.2 billion to increase access to life-changing medicines through the PBS. And from September this year, patients will be able to get more of the medicine they need for less money and less hassle. Instead of having to go back to their pharmacist every month, many people with common chronic illnesses will be able to get 2 months' worth of treatment for over 300 different medicines. This change will save people up to $180 a year, and for millions of Australians, the cost of medicines will be cut in half. Yeah. Speaker, our government is proud that in our first year in office, 339,000 new jobs have been created. But even with unemployment at historic lows, we know there are still people struggling to find work and struggling to get by. The pressures on the budget are acute, but as a Labor government, we will always strive to help those who need it the most. That's why tonight we announce a $40 per fortnight increase for job seeker recipients, plus those on youth allowance, Austudy and other income support payments, helping to deliver a much-needed $4.9 billion boost in support to around 1.1 million Australians looking for work, studying or doing apprenticeships. And we are going further to help the single biggest group of Australians on JobSeeker, those aged 55 and over. Until now, people aged 60 and over and on payments for a long time have received a higher rate in recognition of the additional barriers that they face finding work. But the truth is, it gets more difficult earlier than that. The majority of people aged 55 and over on JobSeeker are women, many with little to no savings or superannuation, and who are at risk of homelessness. So tonight we're extending the extra support for those aged 60 and over to include Australians 55 and over. Yeah. More help for some of the most vulnerable people in our community. And in the same spirit, we're expanding parenting payments single, so it will now be available to single parents until their youngest child turns 14 rather than 8. Yeah. This will provide 57,000 families with an extra $176.90 per fortnight. Over 90% of these parents are single mums. They deserve our respect and our support for the incredible job that they do. Yeah. Speaker, for too long, secure, affordable housing has been out of reach for too many Australians. Tonight, to help ease the pressure on people feeling the pain of rising rents, we are increasing the maximum rates of Commonwealth rent assistance by 15%. This will provide up to $31 extra a fortnight for people renting in the private market and community housing, the largest increase in more than 30 years. But we know an essential part of the solution to pressures in the housing market is more homes for Australians. Our housing accord aims to build 1 million new well-located homes over 5 years from 2024. We're going to help drive this with a new tax break for build-to-rent projects, cutting the Managed Investment Trust withholding tax from 30% to 15%. And by increasing the liability cap of the National Housing Finance and Investment Corporation by $2 billion to support more lending to community housing providers. We want more Australians to know the security of a roof over their head, which is why we're also working with the states and territories to improve planning, to build more houses and to deliver a better deal for renters. For this same reason, implementation of the $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund is critical to build more of the social and affordable houses that our people need. Speaker, our government came to office promising to get wages moving again. They're now growing at their fastest rate since 2012. And let's be clear, when it comes to the cost of living, fair wages for workers are not the problem, they're part of the solution. Yeah. Meaningful and sustainable wages growth is a fundamental feature of an economy that rewards people for their hard work. Meaningful and sustainable wages growth is why we've consistently advocated for low-paid Australians so they don't go backwards. The Prime Minister has said it many times, the heroes of the pandemic deserve more than our thanks. They deserve fair pay for their vital work. I'm proud that our budget provides $11.3 billion to fund a 15% increase in award wages for more than 250,000 aged care workers. Yeah. This pay rise will help retain, reward and recruit the hard-working people who care for our loved ones as they grow old. And the message from our government to the aged care workers of Australia is very simple. You deserve every cent. Speaker, one of the things that makes this the best country in the world is our shared belief that every Australian should be able to access affordable, reliable healthcare. But right now, too many are finding it more and more difficult to see a doctor. The costs are too high, the wait times are too long, and the consultation is often too short. Families are being forced into a lose-lose choice between getting the help they need or paying their other bills. This robs parents of peace of mind and it puts families under strain. It means more problems go undiagnosed or untreated. And it means our workforce is not as healthy or productive as it could be and should be. And we want to change that. With new funding to build 8 more of our urgent care clinics so people in regional communities and growing suburbs can see a GP. A further $445 million to enable doctors, nurses and allied health professionals to cooperate for better care. Changes that will make it easier for Australians to get essential services at their pharmacy, like vaccinations. And tonight, Mr Speaker, I am proud to announce, as a centrepiece of this budget, our Labor government will triple the bulk billing incentive. This is the biggest increase to the incentive ever, delivering a $3.5 billion boost that will help GPs provide free consultations to around 11.6 million eligible Australians, including children, pensioners and other concession card holders. All of this will help take pressure off our public hospitals and emergency departments still feeling the strain of a once-in-a-century pandemic. And it will ensure that for millions of people, the quality of your health care is guaranteed not by your credit card, but by your Medicare card. Speaker, investing in Medicare, helping with the costs of energy and housing and supporting people most in need are all essential measures to assist Australians under pressure. But we know the best long-term guarantee of rising living standards and stronger wages and a better quality of life is a growing and productive economy. That's why our budget is underpinned by a plan to modernise our economy and maximise our strengths by making Australia a renewable energy superpower with strong strategic industries in global supply chains, investing in our people and their skills and supporting small businesses to innovate and grow. Speaker, Australia's biggest opportunity for growth and prosperity is the global shift to clean energy. By acting now, our resources, our researchers and our regions can help power the world. That's why in tonight's budget we are investing $2 billion in a new hydrogen Head Start program so Australia can be a world leader in producing and exporting hydrogen power while reducing our emissions in heavy industry here at home. Hydrogen power means Wollongong, Gladstone and Whyalla can make and export everything from renewable energy to green steel. Seizing these kinds of industrial and economic opportunities will be the biggest driver and determinant of our future prosperity. The government is making the biggest ever investment in Australia's energy transformation. This budget allocates $4 billion to realising our future as a renewable energy superpower, bringing the government's total investment to more than $40 billion. This includes part of our $15 billion National Reconstruction Fund to support the development of green industries, manufacturing and more, and a new capacity investment scheme that will unlock over $10 billion of investment in firmed-up renewable energy projects up and down our East Coast. These strategic investments will work in partnership. Abundant, affordable, renewable energy powering new jobs and new industries in our regions and our suburbs, while our safeguard mechanism will encourage business to invest in the path to net zero. To realise this vision, we're making targeted investments in green industries, as well as technology and other value-adding areas. including a new Powering Australia Industry Growth Centre to help Australian businesses manufacture renewable technologies, funding to support the growth of quantum and AI, plus $286 million of investment in our creative sector. This will create new opportunities right across our economy, and so will our historic and vital investment in defence and national security. The AUKUS agreement will directly support 20,000 high-skill, high-wage jobs over the next 30 years in advanced manufacturing and broaden and deepen our industrial base. To make sure all of these jobs and opportunities extend to every part of our country, we're investing $3.7 billion for a revamped 5-year national skills agreement with the states and territories. And we're creating 300,000 fee-free TAFE places to train Australians in critical and emerging sectors. We're expanding access to foundational skills so that all Australians aged over 15 can develop the language, numeracy and digital skills that they need. And we're encouraging more women into apprenticeships through a new Australian Skills Guarantee. Speaker, in this budget we also back Australian small business with a $20,000 instant asset write-off, a new small business energy incentive to support investments in power-saving assets, and new help for small businesses to adopt and adapt to digital technology. Speaker, we are the first government in Australia's history with a majority of women in our ranks. And as the And as the Finance Minister and the Minister for Women often says, we know equality for women is not an add-on, it's not a nice-to-have, it's absolutely crucial for our prosperity. That's why we've taken action to close the gender pay gap, introduced 10 days of paid family and domestic violence leave, made gender equity an objective of the Fair Work Act and put a new focus on workers in the care economy. And on 1 July, Australians will begin to benefit from cheaper early childhood education and enhanced paid parental leave. And tonight we build on this work by dedicating almost $590 million to the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children, and investing $72.4 million to retain and recruit more early childhood educators, and by abolishing the punitive Parents Next program while getting on with designing a voluntary system that genuinely supports mothers preparing for work. Speaker, alongside financial support for Australians in need, we're also investing in new programs to tackle entrenched disadvantage, putting our trust in the knowledge and passion of locals to break the chains of intergenerational poverty. I see it in my own community, library programs unlocking the world of learning, sporting clubs building pride, community groups mentoring young people into apprenticeships, breakthroughs and progress driven by locals and leaders. And tonight we back their hard work with a $200 million plan which includes funding place-based partnerships, encouraging evidence-based policy directed at a local level, investment in projects that are delivering measurable success, a new partnership that will help government and philanthropy to coordinate their efforts. And in addition, more funding for community organisations so that they can pay their bills and pay their workers and keep delivering for people in need. This will sit alongside $1.9 billion for First Nations health, housing, education, employment and other essential services, and $250 million for a new Central Australia package to improve safety and provide more opportunities for more people in their communities. Speaker, from energy bill reliefs to national defence, manufacturing to Medicare, investments in this budget aim to make Australia more resilient and more secure in uncertain times. And fundamental to this is our responsible economic management and our efforts to put the budget on a much stronger foundation. This budget, we've returned 82% of the extra revenue windfall that's come largely from lower unemployment, stronger jobs and wages growth, and higher prices for key exports. We've now returned 87% over this budget and the last. We've also found $17.8 billion in savings and redirected spending, $40 billion over 2 budgets. And we've limited annual real spending growth to just 0.6% over 5 years. Because our first 2 budgets made such a firm commitment to responsibility and restraint, we are now forecasting a small surplus in 2022-23, which would be the first in 15 years. Yeah. We expect that to be followed by a deficit of $13.9 billion in 23-24 and lower deficits across the forward years compared to recent budgets, leading to a $125.9 billion improvement in the budget over 5 years and a much lower public debt burden. Gross debt to GDP is now expected to peak lower and earlier at 36.5% of GDP in 25-26, where it will be $154 billion less than was expected in March 2022. And because we're returning most of the welcome improvement in revenue to the budget, debt will be almost $300 billion lower by the end of the medium term, saving $83 billion in interest costs over the next 12 years. Speaker, we are expecting one of the biggest turnarounds on record, while dealing with a whole host of programs and services which were left without ongoing funding. In October, this meant an additional $4.1 billion in spending. In May, we've had to find another $7.5 billion, including $1.5 billion for legacy health funding and to make sure that Australians retain access to their My Health record, and more than $800 million to sustainably fund our biosecurity system to keep our farmers and producers secure. Speaker, our government is building a strong, sustainable care economy that works for carers and for the people they care for, which is why we're extending disability support programs and investing in additional home care packages. We're upholding the security of our nation and the stability of our region, which is why we're implementing the recommendations of the Defence Strategic Review and allocating $1.9 billion to strengthening our relationships in the Pacific. And we're supporting those who have served and sacrificed, which is why we're spending $64.1 million to continue eliminating the claims backlog so that veterans get faster access to the support that they need and deserve. Speaker, beyond the immediate pressures on our budget, there are genuine structural challenges facing us into the future: defence, health, aged care, the NDIS and interest payments on debt. Tonight we're putting in place some modest but meaningful revenue measures to help address this, like tightening superannuation tax concessions for those with balances exceeding $3 million, a 15% global and domestic minimum tax for large multinational companies, changes to the petroleum resource rent tax so that Australians receive a fairer return on the sale of our natural resources sooner, raising the tax on tobacco by 5% for 3 years and extending tax compliance programs. But the inescapable truth is that the federal government cannot put all the services that Australians expect and deserve on a more sustainable footing just by ourselves. That's why the Prime Minister has brought together the states and territories to agree on a new cooperative approach, so we can secure the future of essential services and programs that both levels of government support. And so we can make sure that the NDIS continues to provide life-changing outcomes for future generations of Australians with a disability. Under Labor, the NDIS is here to stay. Yeah. We are determined to make sure every dollar counts and every dollar goes to improving the lives of the participants the scheme was established for. Our changes are designed to put the interests of participants first as we cooperate to moderate the growth in costs. It took a Labor government to create the NDIS, and this Labor government will secure its future. Yeah. Speaker, 122 years ago today, this federal parliament first met, called to serve a new nation on an ancient continent created by a vote of the people. Today, Australia is bigger, fairer, more diverse, more open to the world and more engaged with our region than anyone alive at Federation could possibly have imagined. And yet what brought this country together was a belief that the future could belong to Australia and that we would be stronger and safer and more prosperous if we work together to seize its opportunities and share its rewards. A Commonwealth...
Just some breaking news as we continue this budget coverage. We've learned former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan has been arrested. That report coming in from Reuters and the BBC. We'll keep you posted. Stay with us. Jim Chalmers still speaking.
And the belief in opportunity fairly shared has underpinned our greatest achievements, from Medicare to superannuation. The same spirit underpins constitutional recognition through a voice. It drives our government and it shapes this budget. A determination to tackle the big challenges and to seize the big chances. A deep faith in our people, their skills, their smarts, their innovation and their aspiration. This tonight is a plan for security, for prosperity, for growth. It's an economic strategy to help with cost of living pressures now and to maximise and extend the opportunities of the future to more of our people in more parts of our country in the defining, decisive decade ahead. And so, Mr Speaker, for all of these reasons, I commend this bill and this budget to the House.
So there we go. We just heard from the Treasurer there speaking as the budget was handed down. A couple of big announcements there. Of course, the main one you are seeing on screen now, the job seeker rate to increase by $2.85 a day or $40 a fortnight. So that is what he has just announced. Let's bring in our team. Austin Pollock. Austin, first of all, national reporter. What can you tell us about what we have just heard there?
Yeah, Leo, there's a lot in this budget to help the cost of living. Firstly, a $5.7 billion boost to Medicare, which is huge, and free GP visits for 11.6 million people, including children who are under the age of 16, pensioners, and other concession card users. And as a centrepiece of this budget, the government will triple the bulk billing initiative, which is huge for Australians and is the biggest increase we've ever seen, as Jim Chalmers said. The Treasurer is saying, quote, all of this will help take pressure off our public hospitals and emergency departments, still feeling the strain of a once-in-a-century pandemic. We'll also see $500 off power bills for 5 million Aussies and $650 million off for 1 million small businesses and 445 million for doctors. Also, for doctors to cooperate for palliative care. Now, $40, we'll see a $40 per fortnight increase for job seeker and also the youth allowance and the Oz study service, which we know is very helpful to a lot of students, as we were hearing before from Rebecca Sharkey, I think it was. And this is increasing the job seeker rate for those 55 to 59 will receive an extra $92.10 per fortnight, which is quite an amount. And in the housing market, an increase in the maximum rate of Commonwealth rent assistance by 15%. And in defence, which is something Six News has been reporting on for a while, the Defence Strategic Review conducted by former Defence Chief Angus Houston and former Defence Minister Stephen Smith, there is about they're going to be spending $19 billion over the next 4 years in response to that, and something that has is very well deserved and will be well received by so many. The budget will provide 15% pay rise for aged care workers, which has been needed for so long. The Treasurer saying to aged care workers, quote, "You deserve every cent." We'll also see $2 billion in a hydrogen head start program to allow Australia to export more cleaner energy, and will also create thousands of jobs. Now, the budget is revealed in the budget that Australia's gross debt is forecast to pass the $1 trillion mark in 2025 to 2026. So that is certainly quite the amount. So something that it received plenty of praise in the House, though, is the surplus of $4.2 billion, meaning that the government is spending more money than it is receiving, and is the first since Costello's in 2007. However, you can't rip out the back-end black mugs for long. Although it will be lower than the $42 billion predicted by the previous government, there will still be a deficit over the next 4 years ahead of forward estimates, Leo.
Well, you just summed up about everything you said there. Well done, Austin. Roman, I'm presuming you're still with us. Anything you want to add there in terms of the announcements and also the it seemed there wasn't that much of the preamble. He did get to the announcements from what I remember from half an hour ago.
Yeah, absolutely. He kind of got straight into it. Obviously, the first little bit, he opened it with a little bit about the voice to Parliament, which was quite interesting. Obviously, something we haven't seen before. I just wanted to touch on the aged care workers. They'll receive a 15% pay rise on award wages for those workers. Absolutely huge. The government will also invest $72 million dollars into the aged care sector. That'll go to strengthening food and nutrition reporting, which is obviously quite big, and to give those wages a big boost. Yeah, absolutely astonishing, this budget, where all the money will be going.
Some huge moves there, absolutely, and we'll keep following that very closely. Again, let us know your thoughts in the live chat. What did you make of it? Anything surprised you? Anything you are particularly pleased or unpleased about? Let us know. But of course, we'll keep following it, but in terms of our special budget coverage, we will wrap it up in just a sec. What I will just add there, though, is in terms of the big job seeker announcement. Well, some wouldn't call it big at all. What it is it's $40 a fortnight. That is the equivalent, roughly, of $2.85 a day when you kind of do the maths there. So that's happening, but certainly it seems like, and Austin, I'll say this to you, it seems like that's not going to obviously stop the calls for a higher increase, and I don't think we'll do anything to stop those calls. Yeah, I believe, Austin, on my end, that what you just said there didn't go through. So I'll ask the question again and we'll try again. That's on my end. I don't think the calls for a job seeker increase are going to stop after this, will they?
No, take two. Yeah, certainly. I don't think it would be enough to appease the general population who are on the job seeker. But of course, those over 55 will be on an extra $92.10 per fortnight, which, although is more than the $40 per fortnight, well, it is more. It's certainly better for them. But for those under 55, it certainly wouldn't look like, and $2.85 a day, it certainly wouldn't appear to, or wouldn't seem like it can be enough and go as far as many would hope.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see how this ongoing debate continues in regards to job seeker. But of course, we'll see how that kind of plays out. But in terms of our budget coverage, we'll leave that there. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Roman McKinnon, political editor, national reporter Austin Pollock. Thank you both.
Thanks, Leo.
Thanks, Leo.
All right, just a bit of breaking news. We did mention it to you during the budget, but we just kind of want to get to it now. In the last few minutes, we have learnt former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan has been arrested. This happened during a court appearance in the capital of Islamabad in Pakistan. This report coming in from Al Jazeera. We don't have many details on this right now, as you can imagine. We've only just learnt it, but again, it's happened outside a court. This is what we're hearing from local media. GOTV, they are reporting it, quoting Reuters here. Quote, a Reuters witness said shortly after Khan entered the gates of the Islamabad High Court, paramilitary forces and armed personal carriers entered after him. The gate was blocked by the armed vehicles while Khan was whisked away shortly under heavy security. So that is what we understand. That is what we're going to follow for you. But again, former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan has been arrested. So stay with us here on 6 News. We've got plenty more coverage coming to you. We'll bring that all to you, and we'll just of course see what exactly is going on in there, but also, of course, what's happened with JobSeeker and everything else in this budget today. So we'll make sure you stay informed in that regard. But again, stay with us here on 6 News. Plenty more coming up after this break. And of course, you can follow the latest headlines anytime on our website, 6newsau.com, on social media as well. You can, of course, just search 6NewsAU to find us.